tweet us out too. All right, excellent work. All right, let me just send a quick tweet to tell people that we are actually live right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can actually start recording the podcast. Might want to cover your ears though, because you know what's coming right now.
Oh my goodness. No.
We might even take a few comments here too in the end. All right, let's record a podcast.
Cool.
The Crucible Week 3 is upon us. John Hollinger, how have you enjoyed this week of the playoffs?
Well, I think I could survive the playoff crucible. It's surviving the intro to our show that I think is the real question.
In fairness, I did warn you this time, but I suppose you don't really have a choice to just mute me. So yeah, let's get into the playoffs in a moment here. But I think first where we need to start is with some of the coaching stuff and maybe a little talk about some of these vanquished teams. Mike Budenholzer is moving towards a deal. I don't know if it's official yet, but he's supposed to get 8 figures per year, as would probably be a market rate to coach the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, it's amazing because I guess they fired Frank Vogel and then they had a meeting and were deciding who they should go after and settled on Mike Budenholzer within 4 minutes.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Although I think, isn't that the right process though?
Who can we get that is better than this guy? I think that if you're realistic about your coaching hire, that's definitely that should be a piece of your process. Yeah, not just oh, we hate this guy, fire him. It's who are you getting? That is an upgrade. That part is actually reasonable.
Did they get an upgrade?
I think they may have. Now the one thing I will say, this is not a Bud roster, right? He wants to shoot a bunch of threes. He wants to play drop coverage. I guess he can play the drop with Nurkic, right? And do that. Use him sort of how he used Brook Lopez. He'll probably try to have Nurk shoot more threes. But the way those guys play versus the way Budenholzer is typically wanted to play, that's going to be interesting. With those 3 perimeter guys in Phoenix, because they really want to take the tough 2 express, and I think if Budenholzer can snap them out of that, I think they do get someplace better. So it's an interesting hire. Budenholzer also has Arizona roots going way back, so there's a local connection there too. I don't think Frank Vogel deserved his fate necessarily, but Budenholzer I think was the best guy they could have gotten.
I think that's right. There really, to me, wasn't another candidate out there that was an obvious upgrade on Vogel. And I felt that Vogel defensively got more out of them than they had any right to expect, but less out of them offensively. And he's not known as an offensive wizard. Now, of course, they were paying Kevin Young $2 million a year to do that, but also they weren't going to be retaining him. He apparently saw the writing on the wall and headed to what should be a good job for him at BYU, given his connections there. So I think it is actually one of the few guys that I would consider to be an improvement for a number of reasons. And, of course, the actual ability to implement this, who knows, right? But Mike Budenholzer has had, in the 2 jobs that he's had a massive impact immediately on the way that his team has played. And to me, the biggest problem with the Suns was that I thought there were two things on offense in particular that really killed me. One was not taking enough threes, and the other,
Absolutely.
probably a concomitant thing with that, is that the Suns didn't shoot or didn't have enough spacing, and they just didn't really. They seemed to always be running into each other. It seemed like these isolations, just they would run into somebody. They didn't have a great plan, and that they didn't really move the ball enough, and it was very station to station. One guy runs a pick and roll, the other guys stand around, and so I think Mike Budenholzer, like, he became famous in Milwaukee for, all right, we're going to put these boxes on the floor. You're going to stand here. You're going to run to here in transition. He also has been a pretty good transition coach as well, and we're going to hunt threes on the offensive end. And then I do think, certainly in Milwaukee, he was criticized for doing too much of the kind of drop coverage. Well, in Atlanta, he was criticized for too much aggressive pick and roll defense that the Cavaliers sliced up back in 2015 and 2016. But that was the personnel that he had with Horford and Millsap at that time. So I do think he's adaptable to his personnel in crafting his system. It's just that he is so focused on doing what we do well. We have this system. This is what we've worked on all year. We execute our system better than you execute your system, that he then was not able to move out of that, even though I thought he made some strides in that area as time went on with the Bucks, but obviously not enough of them. So I think this is, and then his team is always going to reach their ceiling defensively, even if that's a lot lower than the headroom of the height of some of his players on this team.
I think for all the bluster about the Suns saying, oh, we're in this to win championships and stuff, like, I think maximizing their regular seasons these next few years is pretty important, because I don't think it's a given that they're even a playoff team in the West. If you look forward, if you look at the age of their roster, they can't do anything. Like, they need somebody who's going to max out their regular season wins.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. Now, from an interpersonal standpoint, Bud has been certainly criticized there. However, I think ultimately, and it's also interesting that it was one of his disciples, Kenny Atkinson, who was deposed, in part it would seem, by Kevin Durant. But Kevin Durant doesn't seem to get along with any coaches. I think he's had, 6 head coaches since he's left Golden State. Is that right?
That might be Dan Feldman is the go-to for all of that coach firing, coach killing information. He is the keeper of that.
Yeah, I thought I saw that. I can't remember what the exact number was, but it's a number of head coaches. We'll put it that way. And maybe if you count Jock Vaughn twice, I think this will be his 6th head coach.
Okay.
But Jock Vaughn 1 and Kenny Atkinson never actually coached KD because he was out that first year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In any event, though, I think KD and actually needs someone who's going to be a little bit of a hard ass with him, who's going to have a system, who's going to hold him to a higher standard, who's not going to say, oh yeah, well, just go out there and play 45 minutes every play, play as many minutes you want during the playoffs. Right? I think Bud will also try to make them play harder, but in fewer minutes potentially.
Yeah.
And of course, yeah.
Yeah, much as he did with Giannis. Yeah.
Which could be a good thing for them. So I they got a lot of work to do on the personnel standpoint. I don't think they're a championship contender because of this. But as far as the low-hanging fruit that I could see for them, and Bud is like Mr. Low-hanging fruit, I think this is a good hire for them.
Now, the one thing that I don't like is that they hired Bud right away, and now they're like, oh, now we're going to hire a front office guy, above James Jones.
Oh, did that come out today?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see that.
I'm sorry, it sort of leaked out. I guess John Gambadoro, the Phoenix guy, on his radio or show, whatever. He's pretty well connected there, so I do believe it.
Oh man, Gambo is like an absolute sports radio legend. He that guy's a monster. So, in any event, I think that's not bad. Charles Lee, a very under the radar, another Bud disciple, by the way. I guess he won't be a candidate in LA any longer, but he's going to go to the Hornets, and a guy who has a lot of different aspects, having played overseas, but also has like a pretty good analytical background. He's playing or working under Joe Mazzulla in Boston right now, which I think is a good place for him to be. So in terms of the X's and O's and his background, and he's pretty young still, 39, I think he's pretty bulletproof there. Just the questions, obviously, about can he be enough of a hard ass for a roster that has been relatively non-serious? But Mr. Hard Ass Steve Clifford couldn't get him to play hard either. So
yeah, you never really know until the guy moves over a chair, is the general rule, right? There's just more risk with a first-time head coach. That said, the way everyone talks about Charles Lee, the systems he's been in, like his resume is as good as you can get without having NBA head coaching experience, right? So, and I think it's the right mindset of hire for Charlotte in terms of kind of bringing in somebody and seeing if he could be their Mark Daigneault or whatever, and kind of growing with the team. So I think it's an optimistic time for Charlotte, which we haven't had a lot of occasions to say that in the last 20 years or so, with new ownership, new management. We'll see what I mean, it's not a great year to have a lottery pick anyway, but they're getting to be in a much better situation. Now it's still going to probably take some time before that turns into anything really significant, but they were able to trade Rozier and PJ Washington for like good first round picks, it would seem, and I just think it's a much more optimistic place that Charlotte is in. I think they're actually going to be willing to spend some money going forward, which they haven't been for years. Invest in some stuff behind the curtain that I think they had fallen behind the rest of the league in. Again, under Jeff Peterson, new management. So I think it was the proper hire for Charlotte. We'll see how he actually does on the sideline.
Yeah, and particularly for a rebuilding team, it seems like getting someone in who's going to be on the same page with management is really important. And Lee has connections with Jeff Peterson, and both have connections with Schnaug going back to the middle part of the last decade in Atlanta when it was Hawks University, and they're getting your Kent Bazemores and your Kyle Korvers and your Paul Millsaps and your Damari Carrolls to reach levels that they hadn't reached, and they had some of the best player development at that point. So if they can, I think that's kind of what they're looking to recreate, and that's not too bad of a thing to recreate, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that should be your model in Charlotte.
All right, anything big that stuck out to you here as either in the last week or just overall through the playoffs, as we're got about 3 weeks now of the playoffs in the rearview mirror?
Yeah, so we've gotten some good solid whining about the officiating in, so that's good. You can't...
Oh, my God.
Can't let a day go by without that happening, right? I feel a little for Indiana. I mean, game one they did get a little bit of the shaft, with that kickball call. It was such a bad call. Like it wasn't just that they missed a call. It was like it was so bad. It was like it obviously hit the guy's hand. The ref wasn't that far away, and it would have been a dunk the other way. So that was pretty tragic. But at the same time, like, saying there's 49 missed calls, like, fuck out of here, man. Like, come on. Like, you did not have 49 missed calls go against you. No, I call bullshit on that. And it just, like, it's just such a bad look. Like, when you lost by double figures. Like, come on. Like, stop.
Yeah, that's pretty ridiculous. And if you want to say overall officiating should be better, that's one thing. To pull out the small market card now,
Yeah.
He does work for a small market owner, and that's who he's trying to. That's probably his number one audience there, even more than the league is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you would be hard pressed to argue that Rick Carlisle did a good job in the first two games, and we'll get to some of those issues as well. But yeah, I mean, I was doing the live call of that game on playback, and the DiVincenzo call was, I can't remember being angrier about a playoff call than ever. Like I was so mad that I was going to just put it on the podcast, and I was like, no, this is actually, I got so annoyed. This is not going to make me look good. Like, I completely lost it. It was just so asinine to reward that kind of a flop in that situation by my guy, Mr. Literalist Tyler Ford, and so yeah, it's funny. Like everyone hates Mark Davis. I'm like, I fucking love Mark Davis. Like his games are more enjoyable. Like he lets them play, with a few exceptions, I would say.
Yeah, you might be on an island on that one, but
well, the last two Mark Davis games have been games that have flowed, I think, very well, and I would put game 2 of Indiana, New York in that. Even Brunson kind of stopped hunting for foul calls by the end of that, at least unless he was taking a charge or whatever. But so all right, yeah, the referee thing, obviously it's ridiculous. I mean, well, can you take me back through what the feeling was in the organization with the take that for data? Because that was sort of the same thing, right? That was what, 2017.
Yeah,
David Fizdale.
Game 2 against San Antonio.
He had that legendary rant.
So we definitely felt like we had played well, and the officials had done a poor job. 2 of the 3 officials from that game were not in the NBA the next year. I'll just say that. We did the thing. They talk about, we did not send in 49 calls, but we sent in a series of calls. We're like, look, you guys were giving Kawhi Leonard the benefit of the doubt on every play, and like every 50-50 or 30-70 call, you just gave him a whistle. And at the end, they've been like, okay, we probably missed that one or this one or whatever. But like, it doesn't do you any good. Like, it's just, it
might in the sense if they're like specific plays that you think should be like, hey, this is the rule. You're not calling it to the rule. I mean, I think sure, of course, that's useful to send in.
So you can do like a thematic inquiry. Where it is kind of like that, where you say, hey, they're saying this screen a certain way, we think it's illegal.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you're going to get different refs the next game. Like, I don't know.
But still, there can be some direction. I'm sure that those different refs the next game will at least be aware of what's been put in. You never know how human psychology works, but where you're going to lose them is this, it's bias. So small markets just want to be treated fairly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, honestly, for the amount of money that small markets get from the big markets, I was like, it's like the U.S. Senate, right? Like, Wyoming has just as much power as California does.
Yeah, but all they do is bitch
NBA,
about
right?
California, right?
Like, small markets actually have way more power than they quote unquote should when you consider the revenue. I think if anything, there's more of a bias against big markets just in terms of the overall system. But if you just like did it by revenue, the big market teams would be worth like 10x what the small market teams are, and instead, because of the system, the small market teams are worth like half the big market teams.
But like, it's what they get for only having one team in their city instead of 5. Like, they need to have an opponent for this whole thing to be viable, and they prefer that opponent not be up the street, right? So, like, rather than having 5 teams in LA and 5 in New York, because that's where the people are, right? You scatter them around the country.
Yeah. In any event, I find that those, like, maybe there's something about your players. Maybe there's something the way you play. Maybe the refs are just incompetent. I would be much more open to that argument than, they didn't get the call because we're a small.
Yeah. That we never played that card. I mean, I don't know. Is San Antonio, I think, was technically like maybe 2% bigger market than we were, right? We did not play that card in that series.
Okay, so here are a couple of my things more on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the theory I wanted to run by you. We saw in the last decade the 2 dominant teams of the Miami Heat played small, and the Golden State Warriors played small. The teams that have kind of gone more skill ball, playing small, that hasn't really worked over the last couple of years, I would say. I mean, the 22 Warriors did still play pretty small, although they I would say they certainly had an easier path to the playoff, to the championship than some.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, maybe small ball just isn't possible now because big ball has caught up to small ball in terms of skills. And going small doesn't necessarily give you this massive skill advantage on the perimeter where shooting threes and being able to drive to the basket and space them out anymore, because the big teams can do that too.
Certainly Minnesota seems like a response to that, right? I mean,
Sure.
I will say Oklahoma City and Boston are both still pretty damn small most of the time.
Yeah.
And even the Knicks, I mean, we'll see how they look with OG. I mean, they could be very small, right? They could have Achua at 5 and like Deuce McBride at the 3, right? Like they could be lining up really small. So we'll see how that goes. But that's
well, Denver would be the other example last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Bucks played pretty big, although in 21 they kind of did it small. So this is a theory. We'll have to see. It might be an overreaction, but Minnesota certainly has been the best team right now. Is Minnesota the favorite to win it all right now?
It still has to be Boston to me.
What if Porzingis doesn't come back?
Getting out of the East is just so much easier than getting out of the West, no matter how you slice it. So
what about Porzingis though?
Yeah, I mean that definitely hurts.
Like,
I mean,
if he doesn't come back or he's limited, then what?
I mean, there may not be a starting center the rest of the Eastern playoffs except for Miles Turner.
Oh man, yeah, that's going to be another one of my themes is injuries.
I guess technically Mitchell Robinson is the backup, Hartenstein's the starter. So
yeah, but Minnesota has easily looked the best so far. I think
Absolutely.
I would probably like slightly favor them out over OKC, although I think that series would be a toss-up. So I see where you're coming from. Like mathematically, Boston would seem like they're headed to the finals, but if they don't have Porzingis, I don't think they can beat whoever emerges from the West again, unless that team also has a bunch of injuries.
I would think Porzingis would be back by the finals. I mean, to me, if I remember right, the timeline was more like he'd be back sometime during the ECF.
I hope so. I hope that's true, but it's been a lot of injuries.
There's been, I mean, the injuries have definitely been a story. I mean, you have like active injuries, like where Luka is playing, but he's compromised. And then you have, obviously, the Knicks lose a different player every day. Porzingis being out. Donovan Mitchell with his knees, like didn't look like himself for a while. Now these last couple of games, he's been freaking amazing. So we'll see how long he can keep it up. So yeah, it's been a story throughout.
Well, this is the question that I came up with. How many teams have not been significantly impacted with injuries so far?
In the playoffs, I would say Oklahoma City hasn't really, right?
Yeah, and Minnesota, Gobert had the birth of his kid, but other than that, they haven't really had anything.
Yeah.
And hey, big surprise. Those have been the two best teams.
It's amazing.
Sometimes the analysis is not that hard, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing with Minnesota is that Towns has come back from that injury really looking like he hasn't skipped a beat, which I think we were really concerned about how he would look even when he came back. And he's just came back as Karl Towns. Like, he's been totally fine.
He's been like, he deserves so much credit for actually like losing weight during his convalescence from the injury. He apparently dropped like 20 pounds during that period. I mean, that takes a lot of commitment. There are definitely certain players who miss time with injuries and do not come back, Svelter, even though it is possible to do that. But yeah, I mean, really, like every other team, I mean, some of the teams have just been totally unrecognizable, right? Like you would have to say pretty much every first round loser other than Orlando. Orlando had Gary Harris. That was about it. I mean, that I wouldn't say they're unrecognizable. He only missed
he still played Game 7, yeah.
Or 2 games, I should say.
Yeah, but I mean, the Bucks were unrecognizable, right?
Unrecognizable. Yeah, Clippers, Pelicans. I mean, that's actually part of why you would have to say the Lakers and the Suns are so disappointing because they didn't have really any injury issues. issues.
Well, I mean, except that Grayson Allen has to be Phoenix's fourth best player, the way they're built. So losing him actually hurt. But they were getting smoked before they lost him.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think he changes their destiny in that series. So, yeah. And then just the rim protection aspect, particularly the OKC Dallas series is showing that like crazy. Neither of these teams can get to the rim on the other one. It seems like.
Have you noticed? Are we going to talk about this later? OKC's lineups.
No, we talk about now.
Yeah, OKC's playing two bigs.
OKC, and that's worked a little bit at times. Yeah,
playing. I mean, Giddey has been. We'll see if he gets crucibled here, or if that was just a one-game thing. Threw that in for you, Nate. Hopefully, like, is there like some like is it like on a dare? Like someone's telling him like I dare you to play Gordon Hayward 5 minutes and still win this game. Like, is somebody telling Daigneault that before the game or something?
Has anyone asked him why he doesn't ever shoot anymore?
It's like, unbelievable, right? Reason? He had one tip-in attempt, and that's it for this series. And last series he only shot once, and I mean he's up to like 50 playoff minutes or something. Yeah, and he just he gets opportunities. He gets opportunities, and he just absolutely will not shoot the ball.
They acquired it, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, this guy could be their fifth closer. Like, yeah, really perfect fifth. Like he's like a good version of what Giddey is supposed to be, right? And then he just crazy how he just is a complete non-entity. So yeah, they're gonna have to kind of play that fifth spot by committee. It could be Jay Will, could be Joe, could be Wiggins. Those seem like the three guys that'll be candidates there.
I mean, I think they're still going to try to make it work with Josh Giddey, but I just wonder, like, I actually wonder if they'd be better off flipping things and bringing in Giddey with the bench guys.
Yeah, they tried that in the second half. It didn't really work either. But so that's the question that because Danny was like, yeah, get his ass out of there, which I completely understand that, and I would probably come down on that side too. Although you can always do it in the second half if it's not working as they've done, but would that be your like? Can they win this series or the next series with like kind of getting a 0 from him? Because maybe there's a feeling that once you take him out of the starting lineup, like that's just where you are. Is you're just not going to get anything from him.
I see that's why I think they're gonna keep trying this, is because I think they know that they probably have more of a ceiling if Giddey isn't at least some kind of factor. You know, can they? It's a real tension between winning the game in front of you today and the bigger picture.
Yeah, well, if they go up 2-1, that will give them a lot of ability to do that. And you know, Luka looking like maybe not totally himself, but also like he was just so dead in terms of any kind of the floor game stuff in game 1 that he was able to be so much better at that in game 2. That maybe even was as bigger of a deal than the fact that he's able to shoot a little better.
Yeah, I mean,
he wasn't just a 0 on defense.
He went to contest a shot 2 minutes into game 1, and it was like that play just wiped him out for the rest of the game. Like he was cooked after that.
Yeah, he blocked a Chet Holmgren corner 3 in game 2. That was incredible.
Unbelievable.
Let's see here. So another thing I want to ask, this is dangerous, of course. We're on the eve of you're in Minnesota. I'd be interested to see what your thoughts were on that environment next week. But is there a feeling that the league maybe is caught up with Denver a little bit, or is it just the Murray injury? Is it the lack of a bench, or is it just this Minnesota team is like that fucking good?
I think we're really seeing that the Nuggets miss Bruce Brown. As I played back game 2 in my head, especially like that one play where Murray gets trapped and he's all harassed and stuff. The two things from that play that stood out to me: one, there's no secondary ball handler on the team to take away that pressure. Two, did you see what happened after Murray got rid of the ball? Like, he passed the ball out of a trap. They had a 4-on-3, and the guy he passed it to just stood there with the ball and didn't do anything.
Yeah, it was Reggie Jackson, yeah.
And it was like, well, Bruce Brown would have made a play out of that, you know? And so I just think the playoffs are funny because you get to a point where you need some schematic versatility, and it's hard to do that with just 5 guys. And where the Nuggets had essentially 6 starters and could go in a different direction by replacing one of them with Bruce Brown, I think it gave them a lot more optionality than they have now. Because now what you're seeing is Minnesota has a good ball pressure guy in Murray, and they have their centers who are able to pick up Jokic full court. I think those full court pickups on Jokic have really been an issue. Right?
So fucking good. Like,
amazing.
I'm having to like take a cold shower after these games watching this Minnesota defense. Like, it is like that one possession you're talking about where they just like they're like turning them 5 times in the backcourt like off a miss. It's unbelievable the level of pressure that they're bringing, and to do that in an NBA environment over a 48-minute game.
Yeah. So I mean, there are counters that Denver can get to. I think they might have to have Aaron Gordon bring the ball up if he's being guarded by Gobert, just to like ease that pressure and then get into their offense in different ways. But it's not how Denver wants to play, though. Like, this is going to be if Denver survives this, they're going to do it really, really uncomfortably, right?
Yeah. And also, not having Bruce Brown in transition hurts. And then, because he would just get the ball and just dribble us off the court as hard as he could until you put someone in front of him. And then also, he could have been another guy that they could have thrown at Edwards, because that's the other thing. Like, they don't, like, a couple of guys who got in Crucible have been Christian Braun and Peyton Watson. So they don't have another guy they feel comfortable throwing at Edwards. Mm-hmm. And you can't really play Watson and Aaron Gordon and Jokic all together. Like, so they've tried putting Gordon on Edwards, and A, Edwards has cooked him, and B, that's leaving them too small elsewhere on the floor.
Yeah.
Because they need someone else to guard Towns.
Yeah, they almost just when they go away from KCP, like it almost has to be Brown, and they just have to live with what they get from him and hope he makes more perimeter shots, because I don't know where else they go with that second group.
Yeah, and Minnesota is so good at these closeouts that maybe like they're still not giving up like batting practice threes to anybody, right? They might be we're gonna leave you open initially, but when they throw that guy the ball, they're closing them down still. They're not just letting them shoot and so that's the difference between a guy who's like a real shooter and a guy who's like, some days I'll make them when I'm open, some days I won't. If that guy sees someone coming, he's just not going to shoot it.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk some of these superstar performances here.
Okay.
Let's begin with Jalen Brunson. And what is this performance that he's had so far? Like, what does that mean for him in the hierarchy of the league? Let's say they win this series. He continues to play pretty well. He goes down in a glorious 5 or 6 game series to the Celtics, where he's kind of not the reason that they lost. He kind of is playing at this level. Like, is this a guy who is like really who's top 5 in MVP, but MVP is not top 5 player? Like, is this guy like a top 5 player in the league?
I'm going to say a top 10 player in the league. I'm not comfortable saying a top 5 player. Like, I don't think he's like on that Luka level.
Well, can I ask you a question? Like, why can nobody stop him then?
Well, they're playing the Indiana Pacers. That's part of the answer.
Yeah, and also there's the Sixers didn't have a ton of versatility, and Embiid, and they had a good strategy on him in the first 2 games, and then I thought they got away from that actually maybe a little bit too much, but
yeah,
because they were worried about giving up too many threes. But like, what is the defense that's going to stop him? Is it the Celtics? Like, he's traditionally actually played pretty well against the Celtics. All right, like Minnesota maybe.
If he can cook,
probably the one.
I mean, if he can cook Drew Holiday and Derek White, that would be a statement.
Yeah.
Especially since he might be playing 3-on-5 by then.
Oh my God. Yeah, maybe you can get Colin Sexton to play next to him.
Outstanding pull.
Thank you. Yeah. Colin Sexton had to do that in college because what happened? They just guys.
Their whole
fouled
team
out or they
fouled
got
out
thrown?
basically. Yeah, I think
It
there
was
might have
for
been
like
an
a
ejection or
10-minute
two.
period, wasn't it?
It was an unreasonably long amount of time. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if we're talking about adjustments too, it's probably time to talk about Rick Carlisle now. And hey, you know what? And I'm not going to say he didn't try anything, right? He tried trapping them at half court a little bit, tried putting two on the ball a little bit more as well. But to just continue with Nembhard as the primary defender, I realize he's in theory their best guy. He just doesn't have the length. He can't do anything. Like, these are just absolute layups for Brunson at the free throw line. Like, at some point you have to try somebody else. Like, I understand the theory of not putting Nesmith on. They want to be bigger. They want to keep him off the offensive glass, which they've done really for 7 quarters in this series exceedingly well. And that's also just important to their running game. And hey, you might say, even if Brunson makes that shot, they're not getting the foul line. It's not an offensive rebound. We'll take the ball out of bounds. We'll come back. We'll try to score on you. Mike D'Antoni Sun style. But can you just try Nesmith? Someone that he's not going to just be able to shoot, back down to the free throw line and shoot over every single time, or try McConnell or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers' larger defensive theory is that they're fine with any shot that takes place inside the 3-point line, right?
Yeah.
But they're losing on the bargain right now, right? And I will say I am still really interested to see how this series goes. Can Indiana make this a battle of attrition where the Knicks just get so exhausted by Indiana's pace and trying to play their guys 48 minutes that they just completely faceplant games 5, 6, 7. I'm interested to see if that comes into play or not.
Yeah. Well, once they get swept, we'll just always be left to wonder about that. No, I think Indiana certainly could win both of these games at home, especially given the absences that the Knicks have at this point. But
you know who the Knicks could really use?
Here we go.
Obi Toppin.
He's been shockingly good
awesome.
against them.
Yeah.
All of these teams in the East that aren't Boston, I just have this feeling of are these guys really that good? And the one thing that gives me pause on that is just the way that Brunson has played.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, they haven't gone up against any kind of a team that has any kind of length or ability to fly around. I mean, you mentioned the bargain. They're not making a bargain. They're just losing. There's no exchange. They're losing in every defensive area.
Yeah.
Except maybe on the defensive glass. That's probably about it. Anything else from that series that you want to hit on?
The Pacers are getting killed for not playing TJ McConnell at the end of game 2, which I think is maybe a little unfair because unless you could also get Thibodeau to put Deuce McBride back in for Brunson as part of that bargain, I think the advantage you had with McConnell kind of a lot of that goes away. I do think they need to change the matchup in game 3 though. As you said, it's just too easy. It's fish in a barrel for Brunson right now. You gotta especially, or maybe at least try to get Nesmith to halftime without him being in foul trouble, because he fouls all the time is the other issue. And then you put him on in the second half, but or try Siakam in stretches. You gotta shake things up though.
Well, the other thing that sticks out to me for Indiana too, and their offense has had some really good moments in their pace and stuff, and Tyrese came back and played a lot better. Helps when you make your threes, but not being able to run that Spain pick and roll stuff at the end of the game that they ran in the first half of the season with Buddy, that was absolutely unstoppable with those 3-man actions with Turner, Buddy, and Halliburton making the right decision every time. They don't have the ability to create any kind of confusion or miscommunication that Halliburton can take advantage of. And so it's again, Ben Shepherd has exceeded my expectations so far. They actually have run some plays for him, but he doesn't have the level of movement shooting, and obviously defensively he would get completely cooked. It's hard to have him and Halliburton out there together with Brunson. Let's see if I had anything else from that series. So in my most disappointing players category, like, can we pinpoint the exact moment that Miles Turner just started to suck defensively? Like, he has had no impact, protecting
right?
the rim
For the shot blocker, right? Like,
well, and
where are you, man?
And when they put Jackson in, like, he actually starts making a bunch of plays around the rim. Like, he's doing the stuff that we thought Miles Turner could. And I don't know if it was like, kind of around the last year, but they it seems like they almost structured their whole scheme like, we're going to funnel everyone into Turner. And, going back to like the Bjorkgren days, he actually was able to execute that to some degree. And now you just don't feel him in the slightest.
Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, he has had some effectiveness. Like you pointed out, they haven't been killed on the glass, which is the other thing you worry about with Miles Turner. But yeah, not the rim protecting presence, regardless of what the numbers might say. You just haven't felt any kind of impact presence guarding the rim with him. These first two games. I mean, they gave up 130 points a game too. Like, that's
Well, and Brunson, I mean, that was the part. I know they were up 10 due to their offense, and their pace did kind of cause some problems for the Knicks, I thought. But the Knicks were still scoring pretty much at will, even when Brunson was out. That was the even crazier part of it to me.
Yeah, which the Knicks never do.
What could they do to get Siakam going here, other than him, OG Anunoby, pulling his hamstring?
It's weird. His best moments were going one-on-one against OG.
Yeah, in game one, I would say. Yeah, I don't know if it was in game two. It was,
he didn't maybe. I got him maybe once or twice in game two, maybe not quite as frequently, but. Yeah, he's kind of he was awesome the first two games against Milwaukee. He's kind of vanished since then. You wonder, with OG being out, as you say, if he'll have some size advantages that they can work, but it does require them to slow down to take advantage of those. Like, that's not necessarily how they want to play.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like his speed setting up other things in transition for them, where like Ben Shepherd gets an open three because Pascal Siakam ran the floor and they had to cover him, and so the next guy down didn't get to Shepherd in time. Those kind of plays that he does set up. But yeah, you want to see, for what they gave up for him especially, you want to see, though, like, you want to see 20s on the board every night.
And Rick Carlisle would point to, well, hey, we scored $121 in the last game. Like, our offense hasn't been the problem. But I would say their late game offense has been a little bit of a problem. And
that's been a thing with them, though, because you tend to play slower at the end of the game, right? And they're better in transition.
Yeah. But they had that Spain pick and roll they used to be able to go to, and they slowed down, and now they don't.
And then the other thing is they don't have the advantage of the bench versus bench minutes when they get down the last 2-3 minutes, right? You're not having TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin just cooking these dudes in transition when they go against, the 90 seconds that the Knicks backups are in, or whatever it'll be. So I think you lose that, and so you get a little bit like worse because of that. Not having that one guy, though, that oh shit shooter. I think that is really, like I said, I mean, that Buddy Hield trade, like, that's a trade that hurt both teams. Like, I'm sorry. It's just like he was useless for Philadelphia, but yet his absence is totally felt in Indiana.
Yeah, he had one good quarter for Philly. That was basically it, which was an important one. And they were way down in game 6, but still. Well, actually, he was okay at the Miami game too. But in any event, I in large part agree with you. And how about like a Siakam pick and roll at Jalen Brunson? How about that? Like they just are not running enough to me at Jalen Brunson. And particularly at the end of the game. Did they run anything at him once he fucked up his foot?
No, there's just a lot of Nembhard. There's just a lot of Andrew Nembhard happening.
And he was, I think he was 7-9 in that game, but you're also just, I think, like, you acquired Pascal Siakam for this reason, I would say. All right. Anything else that you wanted to hit on here? I mean, we could talk some more coaching stuff on either side. Players, surprising players, disappointing players.
What do we think about this Dallas series?
Feels like a 6-gamer to me for OKC.
Still feels like okay, right? Like after game one, I was worried it'd be a sweep. I was pretty impressed with the way Dallas came back in the second game. I mean, some of it was shooting driven. I just wonder if the Mavs are leaving breadcrumbs for the next round of like, okay, here's what you do against these guys. And here's some things that they can't handle. Because like OKC is such an interesting playoff team because we haven't seen them in this environment before. And so we haven't seen somebody line up against them 5, 6, 7 times in a row and just pick away at their weaknesses and, you know, whatever they are, whatever we discover them to be, you know, we think the 4 spot with Giddey might be something here. We'll see how that plays out over these next couple days. Is their rebounding going to manifest itself? Is the too big look going to save them? Like, I think it's a really interesting time for them because now they kind of find out what there's just a different level when you go from regular season to playoffs. And sometimes a year later, everyone has the roadmap for how to play you, and they carry that into the next regular season. But this is the first time somebody's studying just them with such intensity to figure out just how to beat them. And it's just really interesting to see what's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is just the rim protection. And Lively and Gafford are both allowing less than 50% shooting at the rim on the shots that they contest, and they've done a pretty good job of keeping those guys close to the basket. And then they're also, like, their closeouts actually have been really good, particularly in game 2 with some of these guys who are like, yeah, we'll shoot it, but that's like not the number one thing I want to do. And then Chet and Dort, you know, their drives haven't been particularly profitable.
when they force Dort to put it on the floor, it's like, oh, here we go. Arizona, we're back in Arizona State. Like, look out, you know. I mean, that was why he didn't get drafted, is because he just tried these bully ball Heisman Trophy drives and he didn't have the shot yet. I
that's
think
part of what makes you think maybe they need Giddey, of just someone who, one other guy in the half court who can get into the lane and like make a decision.
Yeah.
But also Dallas was 18 and 37 from 3. I thought OKC's defense, Anthony Slater wrote a good piece about how they can clean up some stuff, not turn it over as much. So they'll get back to the film and kind of see where they're at. And Luka played better, but I don't know if he can still get to like quite the level that's needed. Interested to see what's going to happen with Kyrie. They didn't need him in game 2, but he's done nothing in the series so far. But part of that is because OKC has really emphasized him. But yeah, I mean, I still like OKC. We'll see. I mean, obviously Dallas could win game 3, and then OKC's got a must win the next game.
Game 4 2-1 is the best. Game 4 with the underdog team up 2-1. Like that's the best game of the series.
Or game 6 with the underdog team up 3-2 is going to be great too. But yeah I kind of like that, because it's just like, all right, either the series is going to be over or like they're right back in control again. Let's see here. Let's got a few other. Let's talk actually about the Cleveland Orlando series. I know that ended almost a week ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But anything that stood out to you from there?
Yeah, I mean, Orlando, in the end, like, I just felt like their shot diet is just too difficult. Like, they're just so dependent on Paolo making really difficult shots. Like, they just have to do something to simplify the shot diet for these guys. Franz, unfortunately, was absolutely, had a Starksian game 7, right? Just absolutely atrocious. So Paolo was kind of on his own that game, but I think getting a real guard will help them a lot in that respect. I think they have to be looking at the guard market and looking at the shooting market, both those things.
Well, no. According to Jeff Weltman, they don't have to. I don't know if you saw these quotes, but he basically, and you may not actually believe this in the end, but he's like, yeah, we just think we got young players, and like shooting improvement is just like something that happens with guys, so we're not that worried about that.
Well, I mean,
we don't want to change our identity to get more shooting.
Yeah. Okay. You might want to change the identity a little. I think you're going to want a little more shooting. I mean, I can understand if he's talking about like Suggs and Wagner, like that they, that their shooting percentages can increase over time.
I am skeptical of Franz. I think he needs to do some major surgery on that shot at this point.
I don't think he's a 20-something shooter. I think he's a 1-3 shooter. But to become actually threatening,
but that's not good enough, though. That's not good enough. Even 33% is not good enough on like just open spot up threes. Like you, the standard for him is he's supposed to be the second best offensive player on a team that has some aspirations.
Yeah.
Like I think he had a few moments where he's able to get some drives in transition, but he basically can only do one thing in the half court, which is come off a pick and roll, getting downhill, and then try to Euro step around the guy and finish. And he is very good at that, but he really can't do anything else.
Yeah, and we saw some of the limitations of that, obviously, in that final game. Name you do hear mentioned with Orlando is Paul George. I mean, they're going to have a ton of cap space. I'm interested to see what he might be. His age-wise, he might not be the right guy for them because he's 34. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or if they target different. I can't imagine them standing pat this summer though.
Well, and this is actually true for OKC too. Like they have a window, Orlando and OKC both have a window of time before all the extensions kick in of maybe 2 or 3 years here.
That's why I mean everyone in Oklahoma City just shouts me down on this, so whatever. But like trading Josh Giddey for Kevin Durant, I think makes a lot of sense.
Of course it does.
Because he has Durant has 2 years left on his deal, and then that's when the maxes kick in for Holmgren and J-Dub. Like, it's perfect. And that, it obviously wouldn't just be Josh Giddey. They'd have to throw in other stuff, but they have more draft picks than anybody. Like, they could do this.
Well, maybe. I don't know. Phoenix hiring Mike Budenholzer doesn't make me feel as though they are ready to admit defeat yet. So maybe it happens at the next trade deadline or something. But certainly, yeah. I mean, I said they should go all in for Markkanen under the same theory that like you have this unique window of having Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams and also Shea on a 25% of the cap deal with the cap going up too.
Yes.
This is a unique window, and so if they're gonna, we'll opt out Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and like get them on some good deals. That's how we're gonna use our cap space. No, go fucking get someone. I don't even if they win the championship this year, they should do that.
Right.
Because it's just an opportunity that's never coming back. And then when you think about too all the picks that they have and stuff, and hey, you know what? They should get in on Paul George too, for the same reason. And hey, you might be worried about those extra 2 years on the end of it, but then you have all the draft picks you could get rid of. You wouldn't even have to give up anything to get Paul George. You'd have to move.
That's true.
Move somebody to open up a little bit of space, but they could do that easily enough.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're getting too far ahead of ourselves here. But I do think like they have such a unique opportunity that you have to.
And no. Let me get to one other thing though, because I am really curious how they handle it this time. Because last time I felt like they acted like they had an unlimited horizon. And then it got late pretty quickly on them. And all of a sudden, holy shit, we got to trade for Dion Waiters and his Cantor.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was like when it became, they're like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we got to trade for these guys. That was tough. That was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Sam Presti just from 2012 to 2016, he just completely lost his mind. And then he refound it again when he traded Serge Ibaka for the number 10 pick in the last year of his deal. That was brilliant. And then he's been pretty nails ever since then. The Crucible?
The Crucible.
Who has withstood the 2024 playoff Crucible?
Obi Toppin, a surprise survivor.
Yeah, seeing these guys like McConnell, who I never thought was as a playoff player, and maybe he's better than he used to be, but like Toppin, like, who really has a lot of liabilities defensively. Like seeing some of these guys play well in the playoffs, that's like, it's like, oh yeah, it's a great story, but I'm also kind of like, how high is this level of play in these series?
Yeah, there definitely some of that.
Isaiah Jackson, as
yes,
I don't think anyone had him being the
Not
guy.
at all.
He's played really well. His rim protection has mattered. His running the floor. He's made like non-dunks.
Yeah,
as well.
This is the best I've seen him play.
Easily. And I mean, it does help him because his biggest weakness is probably, pick and roll defense. And it does help him that the Knicks, they're not really like a big spread pick and roll team, and they're not going to just like let Brunson attack in a conventional pick and roll defense. So that it helps that like, he just can kind of, with this Knicks team, he can just stand around the rim and try and block some shots.
Yeah.
Naz Reid looked like he might be headed towards getting Crucible. He had a pretty pedestrian series against Phoenix.
Yes.
And then he has a terrible first 3 quarters of game 1 against Denver, and then goes crazy in the fourth, and then plays the best defensive game I've ever seen for him.
Yeah, the bank 3 turned his whole postseason around.
Yeah, I mean, and him just like blocking Jokic twice in a row. Like, what the fuck?
Right? Right.
Unbelievable. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, certainly, I wouldn't have predicted that he was going to fall out of it because he does have a modern skill set. But, we're talking about players who are surprising. I mean, we may have even talked about him last week, and he's been even better since then.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been, awesome defensively, especially.
Karis LeVert actually has been pretty good in this Boston series so far.
Yep. And was good at the tail end of the Orlando series. It was bad most of that series, but was good at the tail end of it, and has played two pretty decent games in Boston now. I mean, we got it. Like Donovan Mitchell was awesome in Game 2. Like as much as people are shitting on Boston for that game, like Mitchell was just fantastic. No,
he's had 4 very, very good games. And I think that's good. Like, and Orlando, as much as you might want to say, that's not a great playoff level of opponent, they do have a great playoff level of defense, and
absolutely
he was able to be really effective against that. So that I'm really glad for him because last year against Dallas in 22 and in 23 against the Knicks, like his playoff reputation really took a hit. Before then, even in 21, he was great and he was dealing with the ankle, and then in 20. He was really good, although once they brought back Gary Harris, maybe less so. But it is kind of even with Jokic, it's kind of a reminder. We do these top 10 player rankings all the time as well. It's a reminder that like these things are fluid. Like some matchups are good, some matchups are bad. Sometimes guys are feeling good, sometimes they aren't. Jamal Murray would be a perfect example of that, where it's pretty rare that guys are just like straight up reliable in the playoffs every year against every opponent. Like guys are going to struggle. Even the all-time greats have experienced. Like if you look at like Tim Duncan's stats against the Pistons in 2005 when they did win, but he got completely shut down, right? Or KD has had some terrible series, and LeBron is in his prime is really maybe the only guy other than that
the
2010
Boston
and 2011
series.
when they lost. He's always been good though. Other than those 2 series, basically, he's never been like him not playing well enough is almost never the reason that they lose. I got another Cav for you here who has withstood the Crucible.
Who's that?
Tristan Thompson.
Right? I mean, they hurt themselves by not playing Tristan Thompson. Like that, like right? Like really? And part of that is Niang has been unplayable with an exclamation point.
Yeah. I look, they haven't really had other guys available. I understand why they at least keep giving him shots because they need someone who can make shots, but obviously he's really struggled. What did you make of Jonathan Isaac's playoffs? Like, obviously he played. He wasn't like total ash, but
yeah, I mean, he's an impact effect, but like you mentioned at the start of the postseason that like he just offensively there's just not enough there because the shooting isn't. He can make a shot, but it is not threatening enough that you're going to worry about it. And he's not really that good going to the rim. Like, I mean, he's big and he can jump or whatever. So, like, if he has a wide open dunk, he's going to slam it. But, like, otherwise, he's not going to finish with any craft or anything against your big. So, it fatally constrains the spacing on a team that already can't shoot. So that was more the issue.
yeah, and I also I thought he wore down some having to play more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And playing him at center didn't work. I thought that Jamal Mosley did get out coached in that series in the end, especially some of the player usage stuff was a little crazy. You pointed this out, how he went to the all bench group to start the fourth quarter of Game 7.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think both Mosley and Daigneault have come into these playoffs with theories about how they would use their bench that I think are going to need to be adjusted as these teams grow
Daigneault
up.
went harder, though. He went hard in Game 2. Like, Chet played 37 minutes. That's probably
he went hard. Okay, like as long as Gordon Hayward is walking to the scorer's table, I'm not taking any of that shit seriously.
Well, they hadn't even lost a game at that point in the playoffs. Right. Like, I understand. You want to play him for 5 minutes. He didn't play him in the second half. Like, I don't think it's been too crazy. Let's see here. Yeah, and I think they're just a little more offense, a little better chance to get Paolo some chances. Putting Mo Wagner in for Wendell Carter with Paolo and Franz, they just started getting completely assaulted at the rim. And that was 2 games in a row. That was when you don't learn your lesson from the previous game, that's always kind of a problem for me, right? Like if you look at the film, see how bad it was. I mean, all right, I'm seeing it in real time. I would expect you could do that too. But if you can't even learn that by the next game after looking at the film like that, I'm not very pleased with that. Let's see here. All right, I think that's pretty good. Let's take a couple questions. We can close it out here. So, Peter asked, "Were you surprised that Jamal Murray dodged suspension?"
I was. I thought he would get suspended because he threw 2 items and he appeared to be throwing them basically at the ref, even though he didn't hit him. So I thought he would get a game for that.
Yeah, and also that one of them went out on the floor and could have potentially injured someone.
Yes.
I think if they are not down 2-0 in the series, maybe he does get suspended.
I mean, that's the thing you wonder. You hope that isn't true, right? But you wonder.
You know what? I actually don't mind it. I'm a fan. I want to see good basketball. I don't want guys to get suspended. Yeah, he did something stupid, but for my own selfish purposes, I want to see the best players on the court. And, maybe he just showed so much contrition or something too.
It was a first offense as far as we know. Like, he has not been in trouble with...
Well, a first and second offense. Very close to one another.
Instant recidivism, yeah.
I mean, what the fuck was going through his head? I mean, it was really... it was almost so ridiculous that it's like... like there wasn't even really a precedent for it, right? That maybe is what saved him. That
Right.
there wasn't a precedent for it.
The only thing I can think of is when we were in the playoff game in Oklahoma City where Tony Allen was so hyped up on the bench that he threw a towel on the floor by accident, and we got a technical foul for it.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, he
So
wasn't throwing it at the ref. Like, this was, to me, that the thing that was emblematic of was just that Minnesota has Denver on tilt. Like, they were so frustrated from like the second minute of the game.
This is a good one. Basketball Genesis asks, does the success of Edwards, Halliburton, and Maxey make you temper your judgments at people calling the upcoming draft weak? So those obviously were... Well, Edwards was number one.
Edwards was number one in what was considered a weak draft. I think this draft is considered even weaker than that.
I would agree. Although I haven't watched these guys myself yet, but if a rim running center is the guy everyone's thinking is number one right now, I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably a pretty weak draft.
Yeah.
At the top.
Yeah. So I do think it's weak at the top. That doesn't mean there aren't players. I mean, the comp a lot of people have used is the 2013 draft where Anthony Bennett went number one, but Rudy Gobert and Giannis Antetokounmpo went later in the draft. You know, picks 15 and 27, if I remember right. So I'm sure there will be players that come from this draft. I'm also pretty sure that when we look back in 10 years, we're going to say this was not a good draft overall. But that doesn't mean there are no players in it.
Yeah, there's a difference to me between at the top. I think that at the top, teams can do a relatively good job, right? You know that Victor Wembanyama is going to be pretty good, right? It's like those sorts of evaluations, I think you generally are going to be relatively close. Once you get below that top five, though, I don't think you can really say that it's a weak draft, but you just don't really know. Because every year there are guys below the top five who turn into really good players, potentially all-star caliber players. But obviously, if people knew who those were going to be, they would be top five picks.
Yeah, that's true.
So once you get below there, I don't think that people can have the ability to actually decide on whether they're, you could maybe say there's a lot of talent or a lot of upside or something like that, but
yeah,
I don't think that people have that ability. And even at the top, I'm rather skeptical.
I don't know. I think there's some, like was it 2015?
2015 was Towns, number one.
2014.
Towns, Russell.
What was the Jokic draft?
14.
14. I'm sorry, because like that draft was like very clearly stacked, like in terms of depth. Like
but it didn't turn out to really be right. Like
no, it totally was.
Or at least in the top five, everyone had like a huge hard on for the top five, and like
they were just okay.
The top five disappointed. Yeah,
that's true. And then the other one was the Luka draft was also very deep.
Okay, well that if that was the feeling at that time, that people were right about that.
Yeah,
because that draft is unbelievable.
Right? Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. Hugh is asking about risers in the coaching ranks and Finch's stature having risen with the Wolves' success, and I would certainly agree with that. I mean, he's been coach of the playoffs for sure. Anyone else that has just their overall coaching you think has been particularly good? I think we've hit on it pretty consistently, so I don't know if I have anything to throw in there personally.
I'm not sure I have anything. JB Bickerstaff has been kind of Dow Jones or up and down, right? Depending on what day you ask people, and where Cleveland stands. But it's actually a really interesting adjustment that the Cavs had to make from playing Orlando, where all you want to do is take away rim and force them to shoot threes, and you shift to playing Boston, where basically the strategy is completely on its head. You want to dare them to drive to the basket. So that to me has been like an interesting series to series adjustment for them, which I think they caught on to in game 2, obviously. I'm interested to see what else this series brings for JB. What other adjustments he tries to make. I still want to see Sam Merrill more involved in that series. I just think Cleveland needs that extra shooting kick, and they've been really good when they've leaned into shooting. and they haven't gotten enough, like from Niang in particular, obviously. I know they want to be a little bigger and play like a real 4 more of the time, but like Boston's pretty small too. I think he can play a little smaller against them. I don't know.
Yeah, I think JB's largely done pretty well, especially when you consider that Dean Wade and Jared Allen, who are probably 2 of their
That's the
5
thing.
most useful players, have been out.
Yeah.
And I thought they even though they gave up a bunch of threes in game 1, I thought their biggest problem was not protecting the rim enough, and they kept Mobley closer to the rim, or maybe he kept himself closer to the rim in game 2, but Mobley had no effect at all in game 1, and in game 2, he was really causing problems. So I think he's like shepherding them through that Orlando series with the injuries. They still run a pretty clunky offense, but when you consider some of the players in their rotation that are like not real playoff players, they've played pretty decently, I would say. All right, I think we're ready to wrap it up. I know you got to get to the arena and schmooze it up.
Exactly.
But it is great talking again, and we'll be back next week. We'll let y'all know on the time. We wanted to wait until we got 2 games in the books and all these series to talk this week. But this is fun as always, and we'll talk to y'all next time. Please like and subscribe on YouTube if you are listening there, or even if you're not and you want to just do us a favor. We'll talk to y'all next time.